It all began on a sunny Tuesday morning during a nationally televised town hall-style political forum, co-hosted by two major news networks. The audience was buzzing, cameras flashing, political analysts whispering predictions, and viewers across the country glued to their screens. One of the headliners, Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. The other, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, known for her boldness, intellect, and a sharp tongue that had already gone viral several times. The topic? Government overreach and civil liberties. When Jasmine was asked about recent legislation limiting protest rights, she laid out a calm, fact-based argument, citing constitutional protections and recent Supreme Court rulings. Her delivery was measured but passionate. Then it happened. As Jasmine finished her point, Sarah leaned into her mic and gave a smug smile. "Well, it's adorable how Congresswoman Crockett thinks this is about liberty," she said, sarcasm dripping. "Maybe if you'd spent more time studying how real leadership works instead of performing for social media, you'd get it." There was an audible gasp from the audience. Even the moderator blinked. But Jasmine? She didn't flinch. She simply smiled, the kind of smile that meant fireworks were about to go off. Jasmine Crockett let that smirk linger for just a second longer, letting the silence stretch like a loaded spring. Then she leaned forward slowly, adjusted the mic, and spoke with a voice calm enough to cut glass. "Well, Governor Sanders," she began, "it's cute that you think bullying someone on national television is a substitute for actual policy knowledge. But I get it, when you have no receipts, you reach for sarcasm." The crowd stirred. She didn't stop. "I wasn't elected to perform. I was elected to protect the rights of the people, even the ones who didn't vote for me. That includes their right to protest when governors like you try to silence them." The camera cut to Sanders, whose grin was already fading. Jasmine continued, her tone rising just enough to command the room. "And by the way, while you were busy banning books and fighting imaginary wars in classrooms, some of us were working on real legislation to lower costs and expand access to healthcare. You know, the things your constituents are actually begging for." Boom. The moderator's eyes widened. One of the panelists actually dropped their pen. Twitter was already lighting up. #Crockett Clapback was trending within minutes. But Jasmine wasn't finished yet. Governor Sanders took a breath and leaned forward, trying to regain her footing. Her voice sharpened, laced with frustration masked as control. "Well, I'm not here to trade one-liners," she said, forcing a chuckle. "I'm here to talk about protecting families and keeping our communities safe. Something Congresswoman Crockett might understand if she spent less time chasing headlines." A few polite claps echoed, mostly from Sanders' aides planted in the front row. Jasmine, unfazed, arched an eyebrow. "Protecting families," she said slowly, as if pondering a riddle. "Governor, I've read your legislation. You're not protecting families, you're policing their choices. There's a difference." That got a laugh from the audience. Jasmine pressed in. "You talk about safety, but let's talk about what's not safe: criminalizing teachers, banning books, ignoring maternal mortality rates, especially in your own state. That's not leadership. That's political theater. And frankly, it's dangerous." Gasps. Applause. Even the moderator tried to jump in, but it was too late. Crockett had seized the moment. Sanders opened her mouth to reply, but her eyes were scanning the room. Her words caught in her throat. Because the crowd wasn't on her side anymore. They were listening to Jasmine. Respectfully. Intently. And worse, they were nodding. As the moderator tried to steer the discussion toward infrastructure funding, the audience was still murmuring, phones up, screens glowing. Social media was already flooded with clips of Jasmine's takedown. Within 10 minutes of her last comment, a clip titled, "Jasmine Crockett Dismantles Sarah Sanders in 45 Seconds, hit 500K views on X, formerly Twitter. Commentators, influencers, and even a few fellow lawmakers reposted it with fire emojis and captions like, "This is how you handle gaslighting in real time." She read her like a bill in Congress, line by line. Jasmine Crockett just gave a masterclass. Sanders never stood a chance. Back in the studio, Sanders looked rattled. She sipped from her water bottle, but her hand trembled slightly. Jasmine, meanwhile, sat poised, her expression unreadable but calm. She glanced at the moderator, signaling that she was ready to proceed. But the moderator shifted. "We're actually going to take a moment to address what just happened," he said, glancing between both women. "Because I think our viewers just witnessed something rare, a moment of real, unfiltered accountability." Applause broke out again. Even some of Sanders' supporters in the audience couldn't help but clap. Jasmine didn't gloat. She simply leaned back in her chair, folded her hands, and waited for the next question. Because she knew, she had already won. As soon as the segment ended and the cameras cut to commercial, the energy backstage shifted fast. Sarah Huckabee Sanders was immediately surrounded by aides. One leaned in with a phone and whispered something urgent. Her jaw clenched as she stared at the screen, a flood of viral clips, reaction memes, and headlines pouring in. One article already read, "Jasmine Crockett turns Sanders' smirk into silence on live TV." Another, "Governor Sanders mocked her, Crockett handed her the mic and buried the moment." Meanwhile, Jasmine walked calmly through the hallway toward her dressing room. A young production assistant rushed up, nearly breathless. "Congresswoman Crockett. You're trending across 5 platforms. CNN, MSNBC, even some conservative outlets are running the clip. They're calling it the Crockett moment." Jasmine gave a polite smile. "Let them call it whatever they want, as long as they call out the hypocrisy too." Back in Sanders' dressing room, the governor's PR team scrambled to draft a statement, something to spin the narrative, shift the heat. "Maybe say she took it out of context," one aide suggested. "No," Sanders snapped. "She didn't take anything out of context. She just made me look small. She tossed the phone on the couch inside. She made me look like the soundbite." Jasmine had just sat down, finally alone in her dressing room, when her phone buzzed again, for what felt like the 100th time that hour. This time, the caller ID made her pause. "White House, West Wing," she blinked. Then answered with composure. "Congresswoman Crockett." A familiar voice replied, warm and steady. "Jasmine. It's the Chief of Staff." The president saw the clip. There was a beat. "He asked me to tell you, well done. He said it's rare to see someone defend the Constitution and call out political posturing with that much clarity. You made your point, and you did it with strength and class." Jasmine couldn't help but smile. "Please thank him. I wasn't trying to make a moment, I was trying to tell the truth." "And you did. Loudly and clearly. By the way," the voice added, "keep your schedule flexible next week. There's talk of inviting you to speak at the next leadership summit. On record." Jasmine's eyebrows lifted. That was big. As the call ended, she stared out the window, her mind racing. Not with pride, but with resolve. She hadn't come to the forum looking for a spotlight, but now that it found her, she wasn't going to waste it. The door creaked open. Her aide peeked in. "Congresswoman. MSNBC wants you for a panel in 10 minutes. They said the audience is demanding more of you." Jasmine stood, adjusting her blazer. "Then let's give them something worth listening to." While Jasmine Crockett was fielding interview requests and phone calls from national leaders, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders found herself in a far less celebratory mood. Back at her hotel, things had gone from bad to worse. Her communications director slammed a laptop shut. "We lost control of the narrative within 20 minutes. Even right-leaning outlets are calling it a political faceplant. And social media is eating it alive." Sanders tried to stay calm, but her frustration was bubbling over. "She just caught me off guard. I didn't expect her to go full courtroom prosecutor in front of a live audience. One of her senior advisors wasn't sympathetic. "You underestimated her. Everyone saw it. And frankly, you gave her an opening, mocking her intelligence on air. That's not tough. That's tone deaf." Another aide added quietly, "You've got donors calling. They want to know why their candidate is becoming a meme." Meanwhile, within the GOP leadership chat, messages were flying. What was she thinking saying that on live TV? Crockett made her look like an amateur. "We can't afford another viral loss in this election cycle." Sanders knew what that meant. She wasn't just dealing with public embarrassment, she was now a liability. Her brand of sharp-tongued politics had always played well in controlled settings. But against someone like Jasmine, who fought with facts and didn't flinch under pressure, she got outclassed. And the party knew it. Later that evening, Jasmine Crockett sat across from a top anchor on national television. The cheering at the bottom of the screen read, "Crockett versus Sanders," the exchange that shook the forum. Millions were watching. The anchor leaned in. "Congresswoman, your remarks today sparked a nationwide reaction. What do you want people to take away from what happened?" Jasmine didn't miss a beat. "I want people to understand that leadership isn't about one-liners or belittling those you disagree with. It's about truth, accountability, and the courage to stand up when others sit silent." The audience watching from home nodded, some clapping in their living rooms. She continued, her voice unwavering. "We're facing real problems in this country. People are struggling to afford groceries, healthcare, and rent. So when elected officials use their platforms to distract with culture wars instead of solutions, someone has to call it out. Today, that was my job. Tomorrow, it might be yours." The host blinked, momentarily speechless. Crockett leaned back, calm and confident. The clip was instantly clipped, shared, subtitled, and uploaded. On YouTube, the video surged to 2 million views in 6 hours. On TikTok, Gen Z users began stitching her quotes with captions like, "We need more leaders like this." By morning, #CrockettForThePeople was trending worldwide. She hadn't just won a debate. She'd made a statement. Back in Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee Sanders canceled her scheduled press appearance. The official statement claimed it was due to unforeseen scheduling conflicts, but insiders knew the truth: her team was in full damage control mode. Poll numbers in key districts dipped almost immediately. Conservative media, usually friendly territory, turned cold. One commentator on a major network summed it up bluntly: Governor Sanders walked into a debate with slogans. Jasmine Crockett came with substance, and made her look unprepared. Behind the scenes, Republican strategists began discussing whether to limit Sanders' national appearances for the rest of the year. "She's still valuable in red states," one strategist said. "But nationally? She's now the punchline in the clip everyone's seen." Worse, donors were calling, not to offer support, but to distance themselves. One longtime financial backer texted her campaign manager, "If this is what our money is funding, we're going to need to reevaluate priorities." Sarah sat alone in her office that evening, rewatching the clip she'd tried to ignore all day. Jasmine's words echoed louder the second time. "When you have no receipts, you reach for sarcasm." The governor closed the laptop. No statement she released now would erase the fact that she underestimated a rising star, and got humbled for the whole country to see. By the end of the week, Jasmine Crockett had become more than a trending topic, she was now a political force with national momentum. Major outlets ran glowing op-eds: "The moment Jasmine Crockett proved she's a voice for the future, why Crockett's calm strength shook a governor to her core." Cable networks booked her on every primetime slot. She handled them all with precision, calm, fact-driven, and unapologetically sharp. But behind the scenes, something bigger was unfolding. Her staff's inbox was flooded, not just with praise, but with opportunities. Invitations to keynote major conferences, endorsements from high-profile civil rights leaders, meeting requests from top DC strategists and think tanks, and quietly, an invitation from a Senate campaign committee to have a conversation. Jasmine's chief of staff closed the laptop and looked up at her. "They want you in leadership," she said. "Soon." Crockett paused, taking it in. "I'm not interested in climbing ladders just to climb them," she replied. "But if they want a fighter who tells the truth and holds power accountable, then yeah, we can talk." Across the country, young people and progressives shared clips of her speech with one common caption: "She's not the future. She's the now." And Sarah Sanders? She hadn't posted since the night of the forum. 3 days later, Jasmine Crockett was wrapping up a panel discussion at Howard University when her aide rushed over with wide eyes and a trembling phone. "You need to see this. Now." Jasmine took the phone and read the breaking headline: "Former President issues statement backing Representative Jasmine Crockett's leadership." It wasn't just a vague nod of approval. It was a full-throated endorsement from a former U.S. president, a Democrat still deeply respected across the country. In a time when performative politics often drowns out substance, Jasmine Crockett has shown us what real courage looks like. She speaks truth to power without losing her composure. America needs more leaders like her, and I'll be standing with her every step of the way. Social media exploded. Pundits who had dismissed the moment as just another viral clip were now scrambling to reassess their narratives. One host on a Sunday political show put it plainly: with this endorsement, Crockett's not just in the spotlight, she's being groomed for serious national leadership. In Arkansas, the Sanders camp was stunned into silence. Her press secretary offered only a weak deflection: "We don't comment on endorsements unrelated to Arkansas policy." But it was clear, Jasmine had not only won the moment. She had won the narrative. And now, she was setting the tone for a whole new generation of leaders. 1 week later, Jasmine Crockett stood behind the podium at the National Leadership Summit in Washington, D.C., a gathering of political heavyweights, policymakers, and rising stars. The ballroom was packed. Cameras rolled. Every major network was broadcasting live. Jasmine took a moment before speaking, scanning the room, calm and deliberate. Then she spoke. "Last week, I was mocked on live TV. Not because of what I said, but because I refused to perform, to play into someone else's narrative. But here's the thing," she leaned slightly forward, eyes locked with the audience. "They tried to reduce me to a punchline. I gave them a page of history instead." A thunderous applause broke out. She continued, voice unwavering. "Leadership isn't loud by default, but it should be clear. It's not about who can speak over the other. It's about who has the courage to speak up for those who can't." At that moment, the cameras caught something remarkable: several senators, both young and seasoned, rising to their feet in applause, even from opposite aisles. And across the nation, viewers watched as Jasmine Crockett delivered a closing line that would be quoted for years: "If you come for me with insults, come correct, because I carry facts, not fear. And I don't need a mic to be heard. My record speaks louder than their noise." Mic drop. The crowd erupted. Social media crowned it the Crockett Doctrine. Even critics admitted it: she had turned a moment of disrespect into a defining declaration, not just for herself, but for a movement demanding smarter, braver leadership. That night, anchors didn't talk about Sarah Sanders. They talked about Jasmine Crockett. Not as a rising star, but as a leader already arrived.